Been talking all morning long about some of the biggest news stories really here in Connecticut and some of the biggest interviews we've done on WICC in the morning show. And we did January, February, and March so far. We'll obviously tackle the other months as the week rolls on. But last week, I had given the assignment to both Chris Williams, my producer, and Isabella Gatos, who's our intern this semester, who's been excellent. And it's hard to imagine, but tomorrow I think is our last day with Isabella. But I had given them both an assignment asking them to really thoughtfully pick a news story from this past year. It could be in Connecticut, it could be nationwide, internationally, an interview, whatever sort of stuck out for them, and share with us which story mattered to them the most or made the most of an impact. And here, Isabella, if you want, come on over to this seat, because this what's called microphone is very tricky. There you go. It'll stay up that way. I don't know why, but it's very annoying like that. So I asked them both to come up with a story that mattered to them and that really either triggered them or made them think. And Isabella right away had something that really stood out to her, and it kind of brought her back to a time when she was in elementary school, and this realization of, wow, I can't believe that something like this could have even happened almost 10 years later. So, Isabella, I will start with you, because actually this was Isabella's idea. She had said, hey, we all kind of went through the news together, and I'd like to sort of share something that stuck out to me. And I thought it was a great idea. So, Isabella, share with the audience what story from 2022 really resonated with you. Like, what hit you that you wanted to talk about this morning?
Yeah, thank you so much, Melissa, for having me on again.
Yeah,
I absolutely love it. But my story was Uvalde, definitely, because, as you said, I am your intern, which means I'm in college, and still being in school, it's been going on basically since Columbine with mass school shootings, and it's terrifying, especially with Sandy Hook, with the 10-year anniversary we just recently had. And I was 10, and in 5th grade when Sandy Hook happened, I remember we had an early dismissal, and my dad picked me up, and he said, did you hear what happened? And I said, no, obviously, because I was 10. I remember my dad looked stressed, and of course, you're not going to tell young kids about a tragedy that happened in a school like ours. We couldn't process what happened at Sandy Hook.
Of course.
And now that I'm a junior in college, which is absolutely crazy to say, I'm aware to check my safety, and especially knowing people in law enforcement. I'm glad I've always taught to check my surroundings and exits wherever I go. I sound really paranoid and crazy, but it's true. You should do that, and I want to tell our listeners that it could happen anywhere, basically, a store, a movie theater, public event, work, school, etc. And in the past decade, kids have been doing active shooter drills since preschool. This basically started with my generation, Generation Z, as I said, with Columbine. And another thing that I talked about is nothing has been the same since COVID. Last week we talked about mental health, especially in men. Mental health and violence has been skyrocketing since we left our house due to the pandemic.
Yeah.
And one more thing that I wanted to mention that we actually talked about last week behind the scenes is back in June, Congress passed the first gun control bill in nearly 30 years. I understand there's debates between pro and anti-gun, and my family has been members of the Old Rifle Club in Stratford. My family has a whole history of that. And we can pass, and we talked about this too. We said we could pass bills on gun control and mental health, but audience, if you're listening, I want you to know that it starts with you. It starts with you. Don't be in denial if it's about you, a family member, a coworker, a friend. Do not be in denial, because you don't know how many lives you can save if you just trust your gut and help that person to get the resources that they need for a better future. And I bet a lot of people could agree with me. I don't want to go somewhere, and then out of nowhere, I don't want to quickly think where I can exit before the bullet hits me.
There are so many things that you said, and I thank you for thoughtfully sharing that, Isabella. One of the things that I realized even in this last year, Uvalde was rough for sure, and I think it triggered so many Connecticut residents for sure, as you mentioned with Sandy Hook. I remember in September or August going into my nail salon. Now I've been going to my nail salon since I was in high school. Like, I've known these women. It's been at the same location since I was in high school, since I was a teenager. So for over 16 years, I've been going to the same place. And all of a sudden, after Uvalde, or maybe it was after the Buffalo shooting in the supermarket. I don't remember which one it was, which is even sad to think. I don't know which one triggered me to ask this question. But I had asked the bosses there, I said, where is an exit besides like the entrance here? And we had a full 15-minute conversation about it. Like, how do I get out of this building? Where does that lead to? What is my next route of escape once I get out of the back door? And I had never had that conversation. And I find myself, even when I go into stores or go into banks, my first thing before I even greet someone is, okay, let me find my surroundings. Let me find what my exit plan is going to be. It doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you planned and aware. And it's one of the things that we work so hard on with Mondays we do Crime on the Mind with Lieutenant Jim Perez. And actually, after us talking about it and having Lieutenant Perez on just a couple of weeks ago, he's going to come here to Connoisseur Media, because I do feel strongly about the fact that you've got it doesn't matter that there's so much talent in here. I think it's a shame if workplaces don't take the time to have escape routes or to figure out, if we're not all on the same page, how do we deal with an active shooter? It's not being paranoid. It's being prepared. Mm-hmm. There's a total difference, because being paranoid would be if we let this run our lives. The only way I think that you let fear run your life is if you're not prepared to deal with it head on. So I think things like having escape routes and knowing, where exits are, like those are a big thing. And I think what you're asking people to do is to not be naive, to listen. Everyone's got things going on with them. You could have had a tragic loss in the family. Maybe you're dealing with mental health issues. Maybe you're feeling isolated. Maybe you're feeling rejected, alone, sad, whatever it may be. Don't deny that those things exist. Because if we deny that they exist, it can lead to people falling down a path. And that could start at a very early age, in kindergarten or first grade. And if we don't address it earlier on, we're just setting ourselves up for failure, I think is what you're kind of saying. That's what it sounds like you're saying. Yeah,
100%. These school shooters, unfortunately, range from the youngest. I think the first one was we talked about with Ethan Crumbly. I can't remember his age, to especially outside of school shootings. I heard they're young,
they're young people,
50s and 60s also.
Right. Because if you look at the Las Vegas shooting,
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. I mean, it's sad, but it's very top of mind. And like you said, despite any legislation that passes, whether people like it or they don't, a lot of it starts at home and the conversations we're having and also recognizing like, hey, something is off, and don't deny it just because society will tell you like, oh, that's a shame that your child is blah, 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 or you are blah, blah, blah. Do whatever is right, to address whatever the issue is, and don't worry about what society says about it. Mm-hmm. It's I think you and I were talking about this because I had a conversation with my son's teacher. She had been talking to, we have like parent-teacher conferences and everything. And she had suggested to all the parents to really have your kids be analyzed with a third party, essentially, like have them checked academically to see if COVID interrupted them. Because my kid, even though he wasn't born during COVID, he's a COVID child where he had no learning. He had learning loss for 2 years. So all that fundamental learning he's had to cram into the last year and a half. And they want to make sure that kids aren't going into kindergarten being like they're not ready. So as she's talking about, like, make sure that they get, checked, make sure that they get analyzed, have a third party check on them to see that they are actually academically ready to go. I'm like, yeah, totally. Okay. Like, I mean, I would like him to go to kindergarten, but if he can't go, like, I get it. I totally get it. This teacher, you would have thought I just handed her $1 million. Her shock on her face that we were so comfortable with what she was recommending. She was like, almost every parent I've talked to has been like, what? Why would you suggest that? My child's fine. And I just think that's crazy that we have this mentality that like our kids are going to be perfect. Don't care what you have to say about it, even though you're with them 6 hours a day and you're the one who's academically training them. I'm not. I mean, I go over ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, but I certainly am not the one training Chase in school. If you see something and they point it out to you, act on it. Don't deny it because other people go, oh, that's a shame that, your child is struggling. Well, okay. Like, don't worry about my kid. Don't worry about what I've got going on. I want to make sure that he's good, So I think you make a lot of good points, and I could see where that stood out to you. It's probably hard to imagine being 5th grade to a junior in college and watching this happen so many different times.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for having me on, though. I loved it.
You're welcome, Isabella. Thank you. Thank you for your thoughts.